So usually we talk of three major branches of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, and axiology. And within axiology, we find two normative disciplines. One is called aesthetics and other is called ethics. And what we are going to do in our course after one or two classes, we are going to deal with certain ethical issues which pertain to our research activity as well as the activity of sharing our knowledge through publications. So the ethical issues which are emerging in these two academic activities, research and publication, we will deal with that in little detail. So let us have some survey, and wherever I find occasion, I would like to point out the wisdom which we have in Indian philosophy. So that is something interesting for all of you. The source which I am showing to you is largely related to the Western philosophical thinking. So do you see this article on metaphysics?
Yes, sir.
Since I am sharing the whole desktop, so whatever I open, I assume you will be able to see it. So this is Britannica.com. And if you simply type Britannica.com /topic/metaphysics, so you will get this article. It's written by Dean Zimmerman. He's one of the fantastic Western philosopher from Rutgers University. So he contributed to this website Britannica on metaphysics. And then you can print also, right? There is print option. So you can print the article. And it's not very lengthy article. You will find, you can just see, it may not be of some 10 or 15 pages, I believe. Here you have the scheme also of this article. So it begins with introduction, then nature and scope of metaphysics, then problems which are generally discussed under this reality of the external world, the problem in early modern philosophy, then Berkeleyan idealism, etc. So he gave certain indications related to the issues which we generally discuss under metaphysics. So here you can find the scheme. Similarly, if you look at another article on epistemology, and this is again contributed by very interesting philosopher A.P. Martinich. He's from University of Texas. So you can just survey, and again you find very interesting scheme of his presentation, and more or less you find the set framework. Perhaps the Britannica has given a kind of format, and they have followed that format and wrote on these concepts, epistemology. So you can just survey this article. Then if you go to ethics part, and this is contributed by Peter Singer. He is one of the leading ethicists. Basically, he is leading utilitarian, what he calls himself. So he is from Princeton University. He has written a wonderful book which is used as a textbook all over the world. It's called Practical Ethics. And if you are interested, it's not very costly also. You can have a copy of that. That could be a kind of broad guideline or major concerns which we find in our professional life or in any situation in our life, right? So he chooses interesting articles and he discusses that thing in Practical Ethics. So he is the author of this topic, Ethics in Botanica. And you may have some more interest in logic, what is essential to what we call philosophical thinking. So this article is contributed by Jaco Hintica. Again, this is a fantastic philosopher of our time. So you can just see his contribution to Botanica. And this is a very handy article. Similar kind of things you find in a much more briefed and condensed way on BBC website also. So if you just go to BBC website, there you will find occasional discussions on ethics, on epistemology, on metaphysics. Particularly on ethics, you find interesting survey there. So these are the sources which will generate a general impression on your mind related to the approach and issues which are essential to philosophy and how that approach is utilized or adopted in different areas of philosophical thinking. So I recommend you just through internet. I hope it is with you always. So you can just log in and then look at these articles. Very interesting to read, written in a lucid way. So not much of jargon you will find. And regarding argument, which is basically the subject matter of logic, I shared one of my articles, and a part of it was published by Daily Excelsior also, I think few years back in 2015 also. But the PDF document which I shared, that includes that particular part as well as something more. And again, it provides a picture of what we call logic. So these are the sources which you can utilize. And I know that for most of you, philosophy is not the area in which you are going to pursue your research. But as we started right from the beginning, that the approach should be philosophical, right? Doesn't matter in which area you are working in, the approach which you need to adopt should be philosophical. That is the expectation for from any research student. So what is philosophical? That idea you will get, and we have already seen a bit of that. So let me just begin the discussion which I wanted to have for today's class. Okay, we were here. So I will be developing the discussion and this way you can see that how we can go about these topics. So thing is that I have my plan in my mind, but on paper the planning will appear gradually. And okay, so metaphysics, if you look at the expression meta, so you find it is something after or beyond, right? What you call meta. So wherever you find this meta, that expression is common and it means the same, after or beyond something. And then being a science student, most of you know what is physics. But there is something interesting behind the name which is adopted for metaphysics. Metaphysics is the name adopted to classify the Greek thinker Aristotle's work in a library. So you see in library, you have stickers suggesting that this is mathematics, or this is management, this is philosophy, or different engineering branches, right? So Aristotle worked on many issues, and he is regarded as father of many things in academics. So metaphysics is also one of the issues on which he deliberated on. But name is indicative of something very interesting. Metaphysics name was adopted precisely for the reason that whatever thinking he has regarding the nature of material bodies, that was classified as physics. And then immediately after that, certain issues he discussed, and those issues were compiled, but there was no name given to that, or there is no cue. The librarians or those who were classifying the work found suitable. So what they said that, okay, anything which you are going to keep after the issues on physics, let us call them metaphysics. So metaphysics is the expression which was adopted almost arbitrarily, the way our names are given. Most of us are given names, and after that we find that yes, this name is now forming or suggesting in our identity, right? So metaphysics is also that kind of expression which was arbitrarily assigned to the kind of issues in the library classification, which were after the issues on the nature of physical bodies. So this way we find this expression a kind of arbitrary assignment. But then now you see, we start looking into the expression and then start digging out its meaning. So today when we talk of metaphysics and the way it advanced from that Aristotelian classification up to this stage, we normally say that this is the study of reality. But if you say it is the study of reality, then it doesn't give much of understanding. You consider any discipline, whether it is physics or chemistry or mathematics or literature, you consider any discipline, there you are studying reality, right? Either you are studying the experience of human beings or the content of that experience, and to that you call reality. So this definition is very ambiguous. It doesn't tell anything. But if you just add one more thing, reality as such is addition. And then if you add something here, which is again suggesting something but not indicating much of it. So if you call metaphysics as the philosophical study of reality as such, then in some sense you are specifying its meaning. You're not going to study reality as a material body, reality as a chemical composition, reality as something this or that. You are hitting upon the reality as such, the way it appears in your intuition. And we started with a very wide definition of philosophy, where we say that philosophical approach is something which is not having a fixed methodology, and we adopt a hybrid kind of methodology, or maybe sometime new kind of methodology which emerges in the course of discussion. Same definition holds here also in the case of metaphysical analysis. So we adopt that essential pattern of philosophical exploration and consider reality not as this or that, but as it is. And if you consider reality, so I mentioned in one of our classes that what is there in the reality. So consider me and what is not me. That's the whole of reality, isn't it? Now you will say that, again, this is not telling anything. And this classification is something which is, of course, true, but again, it is not very helpful. I am there in the reality, and there are things which are not me. So you can say that, okay, this kind of classification doesn't make much of sense. But then the metaphysical analysis suggests that we are going to move in this direction only. So you raise this question, who am I? And then you raise this question, what are the things surrounding us? Okay, or make it personal. So what are the things surrounding me? And from here, you see the unfolding of the metaphysical approach. You begin with this, that who am I? And then go on exploring. Then what are the things surrounding me? And you see, in exploration of any concept, what you essentially do, you see what is the nature of something and what is its function. Only these two, nothing else. In our exploration, what we try to figure out is the nature of our subject matter, whatever we are taking up, what is its nature, and then how does it function? How does it operate? Nothing more. It is as simple as that behind any of our exploration. We want to do this. And then we try to compare also. And in our comparison, we find interesting similarities, dissimilarities. And this way, we go on developing our thoughts, clarifying our ideas. And you know, that is the job of a philosophical discourse. Okay. Now, if you look at the metaphysical proposals with respect to Western as well as Indian thinking, you come across variety of metaphysical proposals. What you find, one proposal you find that reality is plural. There are so many things in the reality. And these variety of compositions have emerged out of basic elements, many basic elements. And when I say many, you always consider it more than two, not just two. Many, you understand, here in our context, more than two. What we call pluralism is a metaphysical theory which suggests that the variety of things which we see, they involve more than two basic elements or many basic elements. Another proposal you find, dualism. This suggests that there are two basic elements in the whole of reality. The reality consists of only two basic elements. And then you find another interesting metaphysical proposal, only one element or only one reality, whatever you want to say. So if you wish to understand all the theories which are called metaphysical theories related to what is there in the reality, and you say in the reality I am there and things which are not me. Now how these two things, let us say me and the things which are surrounding us, and that all makes a plural, a variety. So whether this variety, this plurality is coming from something which itself is plural, or it is two, or only one thing which is evolved into the diversity of the whole of reality. Philosophers argue for each of these positions, and they give reasons for that. If you look at Western thinking, it all started with the reflection that what is the basic element which evolved into the variety of this reality. So you will find examples in the articles which I mentioned. For example, Thales, the first, let us say, Greek philosopher. In some sense, you can say his ideas are found and they are slightly systematized. He proposed that it is water from where or from which each and everything evolved. And I suggest, if you are interested in studying A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, there you will find very interesting beginning. And of course, out of interest, you can see other parts as well. And some of you, I hope, must have seen that. So he begins with this Greek thinking. And he says that how you contest against any metaphysical proposal. So Thales, as human psychology can suggest, was somewhere near Mediterranean region. And it is believed that wherever he was born and wherever he was living, it was all surrounded by water. Maybe he was from an island in Mediterranean Sea. So he proposed something which is, let us say, suitable to his kind of situation. But then people from that very region started contesting his proposal. And perhaps he thought that water can evolve into different ways. Water can turn into a solid. Water can turn into vapor. So any kind of things, if you look at all the things around us, either you have their solid form or liquid form or gaseous form. So Thales thought that, yes, water is the promising element in the reality which assumes all these three forms. And therefore, he proposed through his intuition that water is the basic element from which each and everything which you see in the reality evolved. Then he was contested that how can fire come out of water? If water is the basic element, fire is also in the reality. Aag bhi to hai. पानी से आग कैसे निकल सकता है? That means, how can anything give rise to just an opposite thing from it? In the Bhagavad Gita, you find na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata. Wherever something is absent, how can it come out of that? And wherever it is present, how can it be destroyed? Right? So look at the approach the philosophers adopt. And they go for largely a priori reasoning. A priori reasonings are intuitive kind of reasonings, and you may not find exact empirical, let us say, evidence which can perfectly support that. And of course, the opposite is also true. You may not find exactly empirical evidence which absolutely rejects that. Okay? And it has an intuitive appeal. You cannot just discard it. You can argue against it, but rejection, a final or conclusive rejection, would be a challenge. Okay. So look at the aspiration of philosophers. We start thinking that, okay, all the variety of things are coming from one thing. If someone would say that, no, these things cannot come from one thing, because in the reality you find things which are living and things which are not living, animate and inanimate things, and they seem to be so opposite in nature that how can they emerge from each other? Or how can there be such kind of situation where two opposite things are emerging from that? So dualism is the theory which suggests that there has to be two basic elements, two principles on which the whole of diversity is constructed or formed. It's a principle of life and a principle of matter, right? So the philosophers argue for dualism, and it is highly debated and contested whether life can be reduced to matter or matter can be reduced to something which is principle of life. This debate you find. And if you look at our modern style of understanding reality, it's all what physics tells. All the basic sciences accept whatever is suggested by physics. So a famous philosopher, I am missing his name, said that reality is what is recommended by physics. So a biologist would accept, yes, matter is the only reality, and whatever diversity you see, it is all different combinations and permutations of matter. And a unique combination becomes living matter. And then when that uniqueness of combination is lost, life is gone. Okay. So within the theory which you call monism, you find two different opinions that yes, the reality is basically material, or reality is something which is not material. And both the proposals are developed into different theoretical framework. Similarly, dualism also finds expression in both the traditions, basically Western as well as Indian, and very powerful positions. Consider, for example, Sankhya Yoga philosophy, which is the foundational philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. It is a dualist system. It says that there are clearly two basic elements in the reality: Purush and Prakriti, right? And Purush is conscious, Prakriti is material. So principle of consciousness or life principle of material. If you look at the Western tradition, the famous mathematician, those who are in mathematics may know him, Descartes, is a great dualist. He says that mind is different from matter. And these are two basic elements in the reality. Mind is a substance, matter is another substance, and they have different nature. Mind is not extended, matter is extended in the reality. Mind is a thinking substance, matter doesn't have ability to think, right? So you find these proposals coming from every philosophical tradition. Then pluralism. In fact, it is believed that pluralism is the primitive philosophy, the basic philosophy. And when an ordinary mind starts thinking, then that is the result. Based on our ordinary experience and intuitive analysis of that, we can reach to this understanding that whatever diversity you find, there are different combinations of certain basic elements. There cannot be just two, because we come to know through different senses different kinds of substances, and every sense gives a different or exposes a different dimension of the reality, right? So the reality which we populate, in which we are, is founded on something which itself is plural. And those plural things are eternal or necessary basis of the whole of diversity which we see in our composite reality. Then you find another approach, whether the whole of reality is created or it is just there as a brute fact. Whether the whole of reality has any plan, any telos, or it is just there. It's mechanical, right? Physics simply says that it is just there. And some of the physicists would say that, no, it is just there, but it has a beginning. Whatever reality we see, it has a beginning, right? And you find the hypothesis like Big Bang theory, etc. So the reality in which we are, it has a beginning or it doesn't. Philosophers argue for both positions, and there is no final conclusion which you can say that this is final thing. No. Every position has got its merit and demerit. Then the moment you say that it is created, immediately a conception, again based on our experience, comes that then there must be a designer, there must be a planner, there must be someone who can create such grand reality. And if you reach to that position, then what kind of being can create this vast reality that must be greater than whatever creation we see? Again, you find a priori kind of arguments. Okay, what could be the greatest? What could be the greatest being in the reality? So you find philosophers arguing that any being which has existence is greater than anything which is conceptualized, which is conceptually great, but doesn't have existence. So consider two things, the greatest which we think of. Among those, the greatest could be that which is also existing. anything which you can think of the greatest, and if it lacks existence, then in comparison to that greatest thing which has existence, naturally becomes greater, right? So for that, you don't require any laboratory experiment. This is your lab, right? And you are arguing, okay, there cannot be any being greater than God. Then you come up with such a priori arguments that how God is the greatest being and how God must exist. If God doesn't exist, then God cannot be the greatest being. The greatest being is not simply conceptually greatest, but there is a correlate to that concept. So the thing which are conceptualized, merely conceptualized, and things which are conceptualized as well as they have corresponding reality. So certainly the conceptualization which has corresponding reality is greater than a vacuous conceptualization, right? So this way the metaphysicians go on arguing. So what is God? And then they will talk of what is time, how do you make sense of time, what is a space, what is soul, etc. And not only that, they will dig deeper into the material conception of reality, that okay, how life emerges from material things, right? So you just see the metaphysical discourse can be seen from a different way than any literary discourse or any scientific discourse or any such other kind of discourse. And the common thing remains with this, that there is no final answer on which each and every philosopher agrees. But then there is another wonderful thing happened, and that happened not only in the West, but in India as well. After 5th or 4th century in India, you find almost all metaphysical proposals advanced. After 4th or 5th century, you don't find any advancement in the offer of fresh metaphysical thing. Consider this very classification: monism, dualism, and pluralism. What else you can introduce? You can maybe monism, there may be something in between monism and dualism, or maybe something dualism and pluralism. But these are broadest classification, like me and the whole thing which is not me, right? And in between you can go on accommodating different theories. Because there is no final answer to the nature of reality and the way it functions, a natural question comes that why there is no final answer? Why can't we give a conclusive answer to the questions which are dealt with here? What is the issue? What is the problem? Immediately, the discussion moves to epistemology. There is something unique about our knowledge and the way we think. So there are many philosophers, they argue that there cannot be any end of the debate whether the reality is one or two or many, etc. Why? For example, David Chalmers says that it is simply beyond human cognitive capacity to give any final answer related to the nature of reality. This very remark is something which is shocking to all of us, right? Because it points out that, look, there is a serious limitation of human ways of thinking. There is a limitation on human cognitive ability. Now, how do we realize this limitation? Then comes the question that let us understand what is knowledge, what is the nature of knowledge which we claim, how does it take place, what are the instruments which are employed in acquiring knowledge, and then what could be the limits of our approach, epistemic approach. And these are the basic questions which are dealt under epistemology. And if you see the articles from Britannica, there you find these etymological discussions. Not discussions, it's just mention, in fact. You don't find, because it's only introductory article, so things are simply mentioned, not expanded. Episteme means knowledge. And logos, wherever you find logi, that is there, right? You say biology, you say psychology, epistemology, wherever you find logi. The same thing is here. Let me just mention by chance. There is something called ontology. Ontology is the study of the real things, what they say. Ontology. It's a branch of metaphysics. Let us say, just copy the definition from here and then add things which are existing, things which are real, basically. Now, what are the things which are real? You can just go on debating. The philosophical study of things which are real. Okay. And that's why you find this on expression. And electron, proton, neutron, positron, boson, on is basically the thing which is there in the reality, right? And therefore you find this expression adopted in all these namings. So consider, ये मैं छूट गया था, just to have a mention of that. I don't know if we can expand more on that, but issue remains the same. It is an exploration into the nature and function of reality. Now, the moment we realize that there cannot be any final answer to any of such questions, then the question on our cognitive ability comes, and there we explore the different dimensions of our epistemic access to the reality. We all are endowed with 5 sensory modalities, right? So we have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Through these 5 modalities, which are called external sense organs, we see the reality, we experience the reality. But then we find that whatever we experience, sometimes we fail to get in the reality. And therefore, an obvious question comes that whatever we know about the reality, how far is it correct? So when this question of correctness or falsity of reality comes, again philosophers argue and offer different theories. 4 theories I would like to mention just for your consideration, that how do we know that we have known correctly. So whatever we know, one is called, let us say, this is a test. These are called the theories of truth. So First theory is called correspondence theory. Theory of correspondence or correspondence theory. What does it mean? That when we cognize something, whatever we cognize, if we get it in the reality, then we say that our knowledge is correct. For example, we see a pen and we pick up and we start using it, and it functions as per our expectation, as per our understanding. So we consider that, yes, this is pen. So just by seeing something and thinking that it is pen may not be that correct. Suppose we see something and when we touch it, we don't find the way it should function. Though visually it looks like the same, but functionally it is not the same. So whatever we see, we don't find in that reality. That means there is a gap between our cognitive content and the content in the reality. If there is no gap, we say that this is correct knowledge, which means there is a correspondence between what we know, what we experience, and the way reality is. So we find a correspondence, and when there is a gap, we say that we have failed to cognize that, right? Then another theory of truth is called coherence theory. Coherence theory of truth, which means that when we come to know anything, let us say, which we have not known earlier, something which is fresh, something which is new, in that respect, how do we know that we have known it correctly? Because there is no previous history of that, right? There is no precedence. It is so fresh. So whether we have known it correctly or not. For that, you find this theory of coherence, that whatever knowledge you already have, if the new knowledge is conforming to your existing knowledge, the new knowledge is cohering with your existing knowledge, then you are comfortable, you don't find any reason to revise your understanding, and you consider that as also knowledge. But the moment the new knowledge is so disturbing that your existing knowledge is unable to accommodate, that means you realize, you feel a kind of incoherence between your already acquired knowledge and the new information, the new knowledge which is coming to you. Then what would be the result? The result could be either you revise the existing state of your knowledge, as we go on doing in sciences, in scientific theories. We are always ready to revise any scientific theory, given any compelling evidence for revision. Or we try to provide the interpretation of that new information, new knowledge, utilizing the resources of our already acquired knowledge. And this way we try to accommodate that new knowledge within the sphere, within the domain of already or familiar knowledge. So theory of coherence suggests that as a cognitive agent, whatever knowledge we have, they must have a coherence. If two states of knowledge within one cognitive agent are conflicting, there cannot be any decision. You cannot make decision. That is a state of confusion. And if you are in a state of confusion, you cannot act. And if you act on the basis of conflicting knowledge, failure is bound to happen, right? So, and that is not a rational behavior. So theory of coherence talks about coherence or a kind of compatibility of all the states of knowledge or what you call belief, etc. If there is any disturbance, then of course a reflection is required, and then it will lead to revision and then a settlement. That means a kind of state of coherence you achieve, right? So that is the second theory you call for testing the truth of any knowledge. Then there is another very interesting proposal, what you call pragmatic theory of knowledge. Which means if on the basis of your knowledge, whatever you know, you can behave successfully, you can function successfully, then this is regarded as true knowledge. Your knowledge is correct when you can successfully act upon it. That is pragmatic theory. America is the leading country, in fact, in that. You might have heard name William James. He is a pragmatist from America. He was a 19th century psychologist. So pragmatic theory, and if you look at the Indian scenario, there you find this is again a practical theory. This is again accepted across Indian philosophical systems, that the truth of knowledge or truth of your understanding is established perfectly when you act upon it successfully. If you are unable to act, then either it is not knowledge or you are a problematic person, right? So Indian philosophers are very particular about it. They say that jnanam sarva vyavhara hetuhu. Knowledge is the basis of every conduct. Whatever we do, that is based on our knowledge, our understanding. And if there is some knowledge on which we are unable to act, we have to come up with some rational justification for that. And if there is no rational justification, then anyone can say that this is not knowledge at all. It could be just your imagination. It doesn't have any value. Then another proposal which is coming from basically Indian philosophers, you call it non-contradiction or theory of non-contradiction. What does it suggest? That if you know something and you don't find any refutation of that knowledge by any subsequent knowledge or by any other means, whatever you know, if it is not contradicted by any other knowledge, if it is not sublated by later knowledge, then you consider it as knowledge. Consider, for example, if you see Indian philosophers are very interestingly point out our day-to-day life examples. If you see a rope on the ground and you think that it is a snake, and with that, it is your snake cognition, right? You see a rope as a snake. So you don't see rope, in fact. You see it as a snake. But suppose you turn the light on, or maybe through other means, you come to know that it is not a snake, it is a rope. So your earlier snake cognition is contradicted by your later rope cognition, and therefore your snake cognition is a false knowledge. Rope cognition becomes true knowledge. So if you use all these four theories, there you find in all ways we use these theories to decide whether we have known it something correctly or not. And whenever there is a question comes, whether our knowledge is correct or not, we start using these theories. And the moment we find that the knowledge which we claim cannot be accepted or cannot be tested to be correct on the basis of these theories, we lose simply any confidence in making such claim. Okay, so we have to give up that. Now, another interesting debate you find in epistemology is that whenever you say that it is true, what you mean when you say it is true? How can you decide that it is true? Consider, for example, in the present situation, we have corona vaccines, Covaxin or Covishield or Pfizer, or so many brands are available. And biotechnologists would know better than any of us regarding the effect of those vaccines, how far they are helpful. And as a true scientist, they don't claim that if you take vaccine, you will be protected, you will have Kavach Kundal against corona. So despite this, they say that it is safe, this vaccine is safe, and you will have some protection, not absolute protection, but you will have some protection through this vaccination. Now, the governments of different countries have decided to vaccinate the population on the basis of knowledge, which is not absolute. That means you cannot say that it is absolutely true. But still we are acting on that knowledge. What is the rationality behind that? Just a moment before I mentioned that if knowledge is not correct, your behavior is going to fail, and it would be very irrational kind of behavior if you act on a tentative knowledge or a problematic knowledge. What about this case where we have decided to vaccinate the population on the basis of not definite, absolutely certain knowledge? What do you think? Can any of you volunteer? Respond to my worry? What is the basis of acting on, let us say, tentative knowledge, a knowledge which is not absolutely correct, which doesn't make any such absolute claim that it is correct? क्या कहेंगे आप लोग? There is nothing political, so you can make your observation. कोई बताएगा कुछ? बायोटेक्नोलॉजी से हमारे बीच में हैं, they can at least guide us. Anyone? Bhavani Sharma, biotechnology. Brij Mohan. Considering these four theories of knowledge, or theories of truth as they are called. This is good observation. Amit Chaudhary said that I think it is better to act on tentative knowledge than acting on nothing. So not doing anything is more problematic than doing things not in a perfect way, or doing things not on the basis of very definite knowledge, right? Why? Because this is a situation of crisis, right? And the crisis demands immediate action. You need to do something. You may be wrong. That is a possibility. You may go wrong, but then you don't have option not to act, because crisis doesn't leave. Otherwise, you perish. That's all. That is the nature of a crisis. If you don't immediately respond to the situation, you're going to perish. Karthik Kapoor, acting on tentative knowledge may be need of urgency. Yes, that's the point I mentioned. Bhavani Sharma, doing something at the time of this pandemic is better than doing nothing. So more or less you're making the same point, that we do need to act because we are facing the challenge before our existence itself, in fact. It's a challenge for survival. And you know that if life is in danger, then even, you see, in self-defense, killing of others is also permissible. So Corona is such a powerful enemy that if we don't do anything against it, this is certainly going to take us away, right? So this is a good reason for considering something not which is, let us say, certain knowledge, but then we are acting on that, because that this is no knowledge, that is also not certain, right? जैसे ये बिल्कुल पता नहीं है कि ये वैक्सीन पूरी तरह इफेक्टिव है, ये तो हम क्लेम ही नहीं कर रहे हैं, लेकिन इसका कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, प्रॉब्लम है कि नहीं है, दोनों के बारे में अनसर्टेनिटी है, राइट? तो अगर दोनों के बारे में अनसर्टेनिटी है तो क्या करना है? ना करने का कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है, अगर नहीं किया तो खतरा है, राइट? So we make decisions on that ground also, even if knowledge is not definite, not absolute. But then what is the nature of such knowledge? At least this much certainty we have to obtain. We have to get at least this much certainty that we don't become irrational in working on that knowledge. So what is the nature of this knowledge? If it is not absolutely certain, what else? That means you can't say that it is completely true, nor you can say that it is completely false. Tentative means simply this, right? You're not sure whether it is entirely true or it is entirely false. Yes, Divya Sharma pointed out that acting on tentative knowledge is good to some extent, but of course we have to see what are its pros and cons. So when we consider pros or cons or effect or side effect, what we are aiming at? We are aiming at that truth or falsity, these two binaries are not relevant given the immediate or urgent requirement of the situation. So we are not in a position to decide truth or falsity with certainty, and we don't have option to remain inactive. Then at least the knowledge, or let us say whatever information we have, must be acceptable. acceptable on rational grounds. That means we can accept something even if it is not completely true, and certainly it should not be completely false. दोनों के बारे में पूरी तरह knowledge नहीं है. Still we can accept it. So the philosophers discuss that it is difficult in case of any empirical knowledge to decide with absolute certainty that this is true or this is false. In fact, empirical knowledge has this very severe limitation. And if you look at the scientific claims, they all are tentative claims. The claims may be very powerful. We can do so many things on the basis of that. But then there is a kind of tentativeness behind every scientific theory. And that is the openness in the sciences, right? We are ready to revise the theory. We are ready to change the theory, given any powerful evidence. And the evidence must be of empirical kind. Okay. So those who have seen a bit of what we call philosophy of science, they may be familiar of the theories like the theory of verification or the theory of falsification, right? Karl Popper. So consider, if it is not within our reach to decide with certainty that something is true or false, at least there must be some reason to accept it, right? And then that acceptance is for all practical purposes as good as considering something true, right? So instead of claiming truth or falsity in a very categorical terms, the scientists and the philosophers argue that let us resolve to accept something or reject something on rational grounds. And this acceptance or rejection on rational grounds leads to another dimension of epistemology, what we call logic. So logical analysis is precisely this very analysis, that when we accept something or when we make any claim, what is the justification we are offering? Or whatever claim we want to make, how we are going to persuade or convince others so that they accept whatever you say that it is acceptable. Okay, so to me, logic is coming within the purview of epistemology, but then there are thinkers, they say that no, philosophy has got 4 major branches, as this articles of Britannica suggest. 4 major branches: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. They exclude even aesthetics and take it to the domain of what we call literature. But, you know, philosophical debate could be in any area. And therefore, if you look at the essential nature of aesthetics, it is deeply philosophical, right? So I proceed with this personal, let us say, observation that logical analysis is a kind of epistemological analysis. Though we find disagreement on that, but it is prudent to accept that the logical analysis falls under the broad category of epistemology. And in fact, all the philosophical discourse which you have in any branch of, let us say, scientific study, you can bring in that discourse under the epistemological discourse, because ultimately we are discussing that whatever we claim, whatever we know, what is the basis of that? So if we are claiming something regarding the social reality, what is our justification for that? If we are claiming something regarding physical reality, what is the basis of that claim? If we are claiming anything regarding the human psychology, what is the basis of that claim? And the moment the reason is offered, the moment the ground or evidence is produced, it is open to scrutiny, right? And logical discourse is precisely that. It scrutinizes, it evaluates the relationship between the evidence or proof or any reason which we offer in support of our claim. So this way you find two essential purposes. इधर मैंने कुछ लिखा है. Here, argument के बारे में मैंने आपको कुछ भेजा था, so you can just see that. And I got this interesting definition, so you can consider our discussion can proceed in this direction. So what we call logical discourse is employing the tool what we call argument, right? Argument is the, let us say, core of what we call philosophical discourse as such. But when we focus our study on the very format of that discourse, then we are having logical discourse. Or we make us not say logical discourse, but a discourse in logic, right? When we say logical discourse, it could be related to anything. But here, the discourse in logic relates to the very format of our thinking, the very format of our thought. And if you see one of the definitions in our earlier discourse or earlier discussion of philosophy, philosophy is aiming at the clarity of thoughts in relation to reality, knowledge, and thought, right? So when we focus on the pattern of thinking, when we focus on the very structure of our thinking, then we are having discourse in logic, right? And therefore you find the understanding of logic can be connected to the very core practice of logical analysis, that is argumentation. And for that we require understanding of argument and its structure. So here you find a suggestive definition. I find it interesting. I think it is from the Britannica source. An argument is a connected series of statements to establish a definite proposition. Now, this part, the statements which are collectively supporting something. So what you call a definite proposition in this definition is your claim, is your, let us say, claim or conclusion, or you can say supported. I often prefer the supported statement. And the evidence or proof which you have in support of your claim, so that you can call evidence or proof or supporting statements. we call in logic them premises. The reason which you offer in support of claim, that is called premises in logic, or sometimes premises, depending on your taste of British or American English. And the claim which you make is basically what you call conclusion. So when we try to have a discourse in logic, what we see that what is the relationship between our premises, relationship between the premises and the conclusion is the subject. It is called, let us say, implication. And logic is a systematic study of this relationship. Logic basically focuses on this very component which you call implication, which is a relationship between the premises and conclusion. And this way you say premises imply conclusion. Premises entail conclusion. Conclusion is implied. So active or passive, you can use both ways. The situation remains the same, that premises imply conclusion. This is the whole thing, in fact. Now, whether they imply or not, this becomes a subject matter of scrutiny in logic. So whether premises imply conclusion or not, that is the examination part. And when we examine any argument, the whole effort is to see whether premises lead us to conclusion or not. And to provide a kind of formalization of this understanding whether premises imply conclusion or not, logicians produce one simple criterion. What they say that in a good argument, it cannot be the case that one can accept the premises but reject the conclusion. And if you want to use truth or falsity part of epistemology, then you can say that in a good argument, it cannot be the case that the premises are true, but conclusion is false. That is the whole discourse in logic. And different methods, different rules are offered to evaluate and decide the nature of argument. Right? So I suggested in the beginning that when we come to a situation where the veracity of knowledge or the veracity of our understanding is in question, then we try to offer certain arguments or certain reasons for that. Okay, so you find among all those reasons which are given, they are given with two motives in logic or argumentation. Either you want to justify your claim, or you want to convince your audience, your reader, or anyone for whom you are constructing your argument. So let us call that persuasion, right? The justification and persuasion. These two things are in practice when we offer any argument. These are the purpose behind our argument. Either we want to justify our claim on the basis of the reasons which we offer, or we do that to persuade others, to convince others that whatever I'm saying, whatever we are saying is acceptable. And logicians simply use this criterion that if you can come up with this kind of rationality, that anyone who accepts your reason cannot reject your conclusion, then you have given good argument. That's all, nothing more. And the philosophers classify the arguments in inductive and deductive category. I don't want to go into that detail because then it will take much time. But I don't want you to miss the core of the thing which is useful for your understanding of any argument. What is a good argument? So when you are going to produce your thesis, in your thesis, you're going to make a claim, right? And then in support of that claim, you are going to offer different evidence, either in terms of your laboratory experiments, or in terms of your field survey, or in terms of your literature review, right? So you are going to gather the reasons which will definitely support your conclusion. And the examiners who are going to examine your thesis, they will focus on this very part, that whatever reasons you are offering, whether they can force the examiner to accept your conclusion or not, or the examiner has more powerful reason to reject your conclusion despite the acceptance of your reasons. There could be a situation that, okay, whatever you are showing, whatever evidence you are producing, that is acceptable. There is no problem with that. But then on the basis of that, you cannot make this claim. So the evaluation of your thesis is precisely a logical scrutiny, that whatever evidence, whatever reasons you are giving, whether they are supporting your conclusion or not. And for examining that, this must be seen that anyone who accepts your reasons, anyone who accepts your evidence would be rationally compelled to accept your conclusion. And that's the essential practice you do in your PhD thesis. That's the logicality any PhD scholar is supposed to generate in the write-up. So you are going to do both, in fact. You are going to justify, and also you are going to persuade your examiner that, okay, whatever you are saying, it is convincing, right? ये PhD जो है, ये एक ऐसा सिचुएशन है जहाँ पे आपको ये दोनों चीज करना होगा. In fact, this is the practice you have to do throughout your research, right? There is nothing surprising in this. It is this very requirement which is expected of any academic writing. Whatever you make, you must have rational justification. You are not doing in politics. This is not politics of knowledge. That is also a part, in fact, but that is left to politicians, not to academics, right? And if you are interested in doing politics of knowledge, then you join politics, right? Maybe after doing your research. So that is fine. Anyway, if you have any question up to this, point, any clarification you wish to have, shall I see chat box? You can type your questions, और अगर आपके माइंड में कुछ क्वेश्चन आए जरूर उसको पूछिए. In fact, chat box में you can keep on populating your questions so that I also get some kind of feedback. Yes, you are alive. आप सो नहीं रहे हैं, ये मुझे उससे दिखते रहना चाहिए, क्योंकि फिलॉसफी में जो डिस्कशन होता है वो कुछ ऐसा होता है जिससे बड़ी अच्छी नींद आती है अगर आप केवल सुन रहे हैं. And that is why philosophy is doing, right?
सर आवाज आ रही है?
जी
जी सर, जैसे हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि वो खासकर यूपी स्टेट में जो लोग हैं, कोरोना में जो डेथ हो रही है, हाँ, उसको ये नदी में वो कर दे रहे हैं, कर दे रहे हैं. तो सर ये रीजन ये देखे कि क्या कहते हैं, उनके पास लकड़ियां नहीं है या XYZ वो है, तो सर वो लोग अपनी जगह इथिकली सही है, गलत है? मतलब आपके हिसाब से सर आप क्या कहेंगे?
मेरे हिसाब से तो बाद में पूछिएगा, आप बताइए पहले.
फील्ड का थोड़ा ज्यादा
Are they justified in throwing their dead ones into the river on this pretext that they don't have sufficient resources for that?
तो वो जैसे बोल रहे हैं कि उनके पास लकड़ियां नहीं है या लकड़ियां बड़ी महंगी मिल रही हैं, जस्टिफाई तो नहीं है. अगर आप किसी अच्छी सोसाइटी को देखा जाए तो जस्टिफाई तो ये नहीं है. लास्ट जो आपकी डेड बॉडी है उसको प्रॉपर एक वो होना चाहिए. लेकिन जो लोग कर रहे हैं तो उनपे मतलब क्या ऐसा होना चाहिए?
इससे तो आप तो बायोलॉजी के स्टूडेंट हैं, तो आप और अच्छी तरह जान सकते हैं कि किसी वाटर बॉडी को पोल्यूट करना cannot be justified, right? So obviously it is not correct. ये तो दिख पड़ रहा है. But then since some of them are doing this and they are doing it not just for the belief that not just for the reason that they don't have woods or they don't have resources, along with that they also carry a belief that if they put their dead ones in Ganga river, the person will go to Vaikuntha, right?
Yes, sir.
They follow. In fact, ये जो अस्थि विसर्जन करते हैं, अस्थि विसर्जन गंगा में करते हैं, तो that is also based on the same belief, whether you are throwing the whole of body into the Ganges or you are putting only a part of your body bones in that, but it has the same religious belief, right?
Yes,
and then और भी इंटरेस्टिंग चीजें मेरे माइंड में एक आध बार आई ऐसे कि okay, in the Hindu tradition or in some other traditions, certainly not in Semitic traditions, we have the practice of burning the body of our dead ones who have attained certain age, right? Or who are not, who are married or who are grown ones. And we bury only the smaller children or if they are dead, okay? Now, one may think that whether it is a decent or civil practice, given the very visual, let us say, given the visual of, अगर आप किसी funeral में गए हों, आप देखिए, कभी-कभी क्या होता है कि the woods are scattered and you can see the body taking different turns, and it looks so weird. It looks so strange. So one would question whether burning body is a really a decent way of decomposing the dead ones. In fact, some 2 days back, I read a remark, and that is very problematic remark, but it has some reason for that. Herodotus, you know, who is called the father of history, Herodotus. he was a 6th century BC historian. So he made a remark that the particular group of Indians have a practice of funerary cannibalism. That means they burn their dead ones and they eat them. The same remark I heard and read somewhere regarding certain tribes in Africa. And there are some such examples. Now, जो आपका concern है वो एक different situation में अगर हम देखते हैं, so people who do that, they have some religious, let us say, reasons. They have some economic reasons, and they have some fear of, let us say, of their own existence, or there are, let us say, the careless ones. They do that, and among all these regions which they carry, there must be some region which is taking priority over other regions, right?
Yes.
But then finally we face this problem, right? We are facing this problem, and then the way the situation is handled, that is again a kind of point of reflection, right? So yesterday we were discussing on this very particular matter, that what could be done precisely. So my suggestion was that the panchayats, which are operating in certain areas, they are powerful tools of government, right? So I would hold the members of the panchayat more responsible than the ordinary people, because ordinary people, of course, they have so many concerns, and we can understand some sort of irrationality in the common population, those who are not so educated, or even if they are educated, they have some kind of different careless attitude. But the leaders who are the local leaders in the panchayats, gram pradhan hai, members hain, they know it precisely, right? और जहां से भी वो बॉडी फेंकी जा रही है और जिस भी एरिया में जा रही हैं, they all are passing through different panchayats. And if you look at the subject matter of panchayats, maintaining funeral grounds is one of the greatest responsibility given to the panchayats. We cannot just blame the district collector and the SP and other government officials. Look at the people, the villages which are situated near the banks. The panchayats are the most powerful tools, and they can handle it in a much more better way than any government agency. And panchayats are very important function of the government. In fact, they are the government. If you see the concept of government, the constitution makes provisions regarding all these. The panchayats have acquired the constitutional status. प्रधान उसी तरह गवर्नमेंट का पार्ट है जिस तरह से प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया है, and they cannot just show the dereliction of their duties, right? So I would hold these panchayats more responsible than any government functionaries.
Just to add one thing, sir, to the same question actually. If we go as per the act which has been passed and the enforcement which the government has actually put some responsibilities on the government functionaries here. The question originally was that is it ethical to dispose of the bodies in the river? I would say it is totally wrong. Why? Because there are two things. It is unlawful because it is there in the epidemic act that the body has to be disposed of properly. And the government functionaries here, sir, I would add here the concerned disposal of a COVID positive body, if it is a COVID positive body, it has to be done under the supervision of the DM and SP of that district. So I would say, sir, panchayats here, they have a social responsibility that is fine. But legally, if we move as per the book, as per this National Disaster Management Act, it is very clearly written there that if the body is COVID positive, now I'm just talking about the COVID
Okay, yes.
pandemic only. So it is the sole responsibility of the DM and the SP there to ensure that the body is disposed of as per the as per the norms of this act. So here they have to be held responsible because the body cannot go in J&K if anybody.
Provided they know, in fact, by any means they come to know that yes, someone died of corona, right? And
Sir, as it was reported that they all have been COVID positive. So if they were
नहीं,
COVID positive,
वो तो बाद में पता लगा। मैं ये कह रहा था कि अगर डीएम एसपी या पुलिस स्टेशन को पता है ये चीज कि हाँ कोरोना पॉजिटिव बॉडीज डंप हो रहे हैं, सर्टेनली उनको एटलीस्ट जो लोकल पुलिस स्टेशन होता है, जैसे मैंने पंचायत के बारे में रिमार्क किया, सेम रिमार्क इज रिगार्डिंग द स्टेशन हाउस ऑफिसर. So of course there are many lapses, but the philosophical point is that whatever they are doing, there could be a rationality on their part, but there are layers of check and balance system, right? So there is a kind of successive failure of different layers. Let us move. I think these are some, let us say, points. So when we try to examine the reasons which are offered in support of any act or any claim, the ultimate test which the logicians offer is that whatever reasons you are offering, whether those reasons provide unfailing support to your claim or not. And on this matter, Indian philosophers have wonderful discussion, in fact. So I would like to point out one structure from Indian philosophy, and the structure is coming from Jainism. And you will see, I said that the relationship between premises and conclusion is the main subject matter of the study in logic, and they examine this relationship, how strong is the relationship. And the article which I shared, if you just go through, I don't want to go into that detail. If you go through it, then you can see that yes, there could be degrees of relationship between premises and conclusion. In an ideal situation, the support could be so strong or absolute, let us say, the support could be absolute that anyone accepting the premises cannot reject the conclusion. That means the premises provide absolute support to the conclusion. For example, if you say that all human beings are mortal, and I am a human being, Anil Tiwari is a human being, then you can completely with all confidence say that Anil Tiwari is mortal. So given that all human beings are mortal and Anil Tiwari is a human being, therefore Anil Tiwari is mortal. So if you accept the premises that all human beings are mortal, Anil Tiwari is a human being, you cannot reject that Anil Tiwari is mortal. This is called absolute kind of support. The premises provide absolute support to its conclusion. To some extent, that is possible in mathematics. That too in formal mathematics. In fact, when you go to probability theory, etc., or set theory, even there you find a lot more social science or psychologism involved. But certainly, in let us say engineering, a lot more things are there. In biotechnology, many things can be discussed. Social sciences are full of such aberrations, in fact, and therefore a more careful approach is required to figure out the limitations in making claim between the premises and conclusion. And then if you look at literature, then even you have poetry, right? Where without logicality, you can generate aesthetic sense, right? But if you have logicality also, it becomes enjoyable even to logicians, right? So let me just quickly show you the Jaina model of argumentation. And I don't find any better model as per my limited understanding related to how we go about any discourse philosophically. So let me share you a small document, and then there are 10 points. So you will enjoy these things. To brief certain concepts in Indian philosophy, the regions which you offer, they are called hetu in Indian philosophy. Hetu. Just confirm whether whatever I open, you see that. So can you see the Word document which we were using earlier? Okay. So whatever reason you provide, that is called hetu. Reason or provenance is another term used by contemporary epistemologists. So on the basis of that, you make a claim. And then whatever you want to prove, that is called sadhya. The inferred or inferentially established knowledge. Or conclusion, you can say the inferred, or you can say conclusion. जो भी आप claim कर रहे हैं, जो भी और जिस basis पे कर रहे हैं, उसको हेतु कह रहे हैं. For example, Indian philosophers give very popular instance that if there is smoke in a place, there is presence of fire in that place. So when you see smoke emerging from any place, you can infer that there is the presence of fire. Though you are not in a position to see that, in a remote place, let us say, you can see smoke emerging out of that. So you can infer that there is the presence of fire. Why? What is the basis of this inference? You know that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. How do you know that? That there is a necessary relationship between smoke and fire. And unless there is a necessary relationship between smoke and fire, you cannot infer that there is a fire by observing smoke, right? So in the Indian tradition, the necessary relationship between hetu and sadhya is called vyapti. And this is called invariable concomitance. Invariable concomitance. That means there is an element of necessity that if there is smoke, there must be fire, right? Not the other way around. You cannot say that if there is fire, there is a smoke, because there are many places of fire where you don't find smoke. For example, in your tube light, or in any heater, or in any induction stove, etc. There you have fire, but you don't have a smoke, because smoke requires, production of smoke requires some kind of wetness of fuel, etc. So unless that condition is satisfied, you can't have smoke. But wherever there is smoke, there is fire. How do you know that? The Indian philosophers say that through the method of agreement and disagreement, and they give other conditions also. But method of agreement and disagreement is good enough in our case. So they say that you have seen that wherever there was smoke, you found fire. As in your kitchen, or in the garbage, maybe near your house, or in the city. So there you see someone setting fire. The garbage is lit, and therefore you see there that yes, smoke is coming out of fire. Okay. So that is your positive example. You have the method of agreement. Wherever you have seen personally smoke, there you found fire from your personal experience, right? Similarly, you have not found smoke in any such place from your personal experience where there was no fire. So the method of agreement suggests that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. And the method of disagreement suggests that wherever there is no fire, there is no smoke. And then Indian philosophers have a very interesting way of discussing these things. So they say that, okay, suppose there is a fire somewhere near your house, but then smoke flows and enters in your house. So now smoke is in your house, but where is fire in your house? There is no fire. Then Indian philosophers say that no, smoke must be seamlessly connected to its source. So you can say that smoke is not in house, it is seamlessly connected to the place of origin, that is fiery, right? So इस तरह से वो argument करते हैं. Okay, even I can't even move. That is already 11. Okay, so let us stop here on this note that unless there is an element of necessity between your regions and the claim which you are making, nobody will buy your thesis. Nobody will buy your argument. The whole debate is on this very relationship.